I've been climbing for the past 11 years and I've seen a ton of advice thrown around the internet. Heck, I've been responsible for some of that advice. But the one climbing training tip that I don't see talked about enough is this. Train for climbing in a way that matches the routes you want to climb. In this video, I'm going to talk about what this tip means. I'm going to talk about the mistakes that I've made against this tip, and then I'm going to give some pro examples of how they use this tip in their training on a daily basis. So what do I mean by this tip? Train in a way that replicates the climbs you want to accomplish. Basically, to give you an example, if I'm projecting some 512 that's really sequential, it strings together a lot of difficult moves back to back to back. But in the climbing gym, when I go to train, I'm just projecting pumpy one move wonder boulder problems on an overhanging wall. Or if I'm working on the moon board and just trying to send the hardest project imaginable, I'm losing out on potential gains that would help me send this project. To give another example, if I'm training for alpine climbing, doing some moderates, low-level, easy trad climbing in the mountains, and I spend all of my time at the sport climbing gym trying to train my pump, when I'm not addressing things like slab climbing technique, muscular endurance for the approach, and just general stamina on a big day out in the mountains, then I'm not gonna be able to accomplish those goals as successfully as I would if I trained specifically in a way that replicated that climb that I wanted to accomplish. And the reason why I want to address this tip is because I think with some small tweaks to how we approach our climbing training, I could see some pretty massive improvements in my climbing goals and my outdoor climbing objectives. So I think this tip has two key components to address in order to see some massive gains. The first is to find and make a climbing goal. The second is to train in a way that helps you accomplish said goal. So it really all has to do with goal setting and being very intentional with your training. Now, I thought that I had climbing goals my whole life, but the reality is that climbing goal was always just try to send harder than I did the day before. And that doesn't cut it as a climbing goal. I think having specific routes in mind that you want to send, or a specific objective of what you want to accomplish outside. Let's say I want to climb 20 routes in a day, or I want to climb this alpine climb in Rocky Mountain National Park. I live in Colorado. Those are specific and tangible goals that we can actually train towards. If your goal is just to send a grade harder, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to pinpoint specific remedies to address that goal. So I'm going to give you some examples of how this tip plays out using my own climbing experience. And yeah, there are mistakes that I wish I did differently. Over the winter, I got into outdoor bouldering and found this V7 project outside in Clear Creek Canyon, Colorado. I really wanted to send this thing. I did a couple of vlog style videos that you can watch on my channel, and I made some really solid efforts to get to the top, almost sticking the crux. Then I went under a training regimen that I found on YouTube from another YouTuber, Emil Abrahamson, and I made a video following this routine where I trained every single day, twice a day on the hangboard for 30 days. And I saw some massive improvements to my hangboarding and overall strength from this training regimen. You can watch that video on my channel as well. And in following this training regime where I was hangboarding twice a day, I saw a huge improvement to my max hang. I saw a huge improvement to my timed 10mm hang time. So you can say that my fingers were getting massively stronger. But I went back to my outdoor project, and the reality was that I was making the same progress on this boulder that I was at the start of the video than I did after this 30-day training regime. Oh, dang it. So what happened? I got really good at hangboarding by following this training regime. I didn't get very good at outdoor bouldering. The reality is that I should have trained in a way that replicated this outdoor project and done more outdoor bouldering, tried to do similar moves to this project, but instead I was hangboarding and training indoors and seeing gains to those categories when my goal was something else. And after this 30-day challenge, I was kind of bummed out. I wanted to see way more improvements to how hard I could send outside. Another example, about 6 years ago, I went to the Wind River Range in Wyoming to do some alpine trad climbing. I was stoked about this trip. I did a lot of training for it, and in that training, I just tried to get really, really strong so that I could climb for a long period of time. And this training was mostly indoor gym climbing. I was trying to fight the pump, climb a lot of routes in a row, and I was feeling pretty strong and pretty jacked up, ready to climb in the winds. When this trip happened, I was surprised at how strenuous the approach was to this trip. It was about a 5-mile approach with this really, really heavy pack and over a mountain pass that was quite tall. When we eventually got to camp, I was totally beat. I could hardly do anything. and the next day we were supposed to climb. I was so tired from this approach that I was just like feeling very not confident. I wasn't feeling really strong on the wall, and it resulted to us just keeping things really, really tame and not going after some of those climbs that we had hoped to get after in the winds. And so to apply that advice, my goal was to climb these routes in the winds, and I didn't train in a way that allowed me to accomplish this goal. In reality, I should have trained the approach more, I should have trained my endurance more, and by doing these things, it would have allowed me to have had a much better time in the winds and climb those harder, more sought after objectives that I was going for. It was still a great trip, by the way. And so how does this play out among the professional climbers? There are honestly too many examples to count. Pros do this exceptionally well, but to name a few recent examples, Will Bosey, to train for the V17 Burden of Dreams, climbed on a replica in a climbing gym that matched the angle and it matched all of the different moves. I think they even printed out replicas of the actual holds. But he was able to do that and then climb this project in a really, really short amount of time. Another example is Tommy Caldwell training for the Dawn Wall. He did this project, I mean, it was years in the making to actually send the Dawn Wall, but eventually he made replicas in his backyard of the dyno and the various moves he encountered on the route so that he could have more success when he went to Yosemite and actually got on the wall. His goal was the Dawn Wall, and so he trained in a way that really, really closely resembled what the Dawn Wall was. Another example is Alex Honnold, famously training for his solo of Half Dome. He went to Zion to solo some really, really hard cracks because he knew that he would encounter cracks in Yosemite, and in the process climbed these routes like Moonlight Buttress, working up to his goal of free soloing Half Dome. I mean, you could go on and on about how these professional climbers replicate the goals that they want to accomplish, and I think it's really, really good evidence that as more intermediate and novice climbers, we should be doing the same thing. All this is to say that I don't think you should stop hangboarding, I don't think you should stop training in the climbing gym at all, but I think it's a really positive practice to form a goal and think about what ways you could train in a way that'll help you accomplish that goal. It's something that I'm trying to do way more of, and I think it's really shifting how I approach climbing outside. And so that is my climbing training tip. It might seem really simple and something that you don't have to pay attention to, but I think when you go through the steps of actually making a goal and working to that goal, you can see some massive improvements to your climbing. So if you liked this sort of video, leave me a comment, let me know what you thought, and consider subscribing, and I will see you next time.